ready.
All right, I am for the plaintiff, Mr. Goodrich.
I am the witness, Shirley
the court.
Williams.
I'm sorry. And I am for the defense, Ms. Matthews.
All right, we will continue now with the people's case in chief. Are both parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, we are ready to call our next witness at this time.
Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed. Thank you.
All right, call your next witness.
Your Honor, the people call Shirley Williams as our next witness.
All right, please step forward and take the witness stand, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
My name is Shirley Williams, Williams.
Mr. Goodrich, proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Williams, how are you currently employed?
I am a driver for Royal Uniform Supply.
Were you in that same capacity in December of 1998?
Yes, I was.
As a driver for that company, did you make routine deliveries?
Yes, I do.
And who typically are the clients or customers?
I have an area that I cover and service. It would be mostly gas stations, but then I also have a couple small businesses in my sales area too.
Do you have as one of your clients Bob's, Chevron, and Tustin?
Yes, sir, I do.
And were they one of your clients in December of 1998?
Yes, they were. I have had that account for approximately 10 years.
All right, do you recall making a call at a Chevron station in December of 1998 when something unusual happened?
Yes, I certainly do.
Do you remember the date by any chance?
No, I'm afraid I don't. I could look at my account book and try to trace back, but I couldn't be certain. I call on that service twice a week normally.
If I told you that the date was December 15, would that sound correct?
I really don't remember the date.
That's fine. Why don't you tell us what happened on that approximate date at the Chevron station while you were in attendance?
Okay.
Your Honor, I hate to interrupt, but I don't believe that we should have a narrative from this witness.
All right, sustain. Let's have questions and answers.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Williams, do you recall if there were any customers in the station when you arrived?
There were some cars at the gas pumps and a couple individuals who were in the market shopping.
Is there a market at the gas station?
Yes, it is just like a little market where you can buy cigarettes or soda, things like that. People also pay for their gas at the counter there.
I understand. Where were you when you first noticed something unusual?
I was in the garage area taking an inventory of uniforms when I heard a crash through the door.
What was it exactly that you heard?
I heard what sounded like a door breaking open. It was pretty loud and sudden.
What did you observe at that time?
I immediately turned around and I saw two men on the ground. They appeared to be fighting.
Okay, what do you mean that they appeared to be fighting?
Well, they were rolling around and hitting each other and swearing pretty loudly.
Did you recognize either of the two gentlemen?
Yes, I did.
Who was it that you knew?
Objection assumes a fact, not an evidence, that he knew the gentleman. The witness just stated that he recognized someone.
Overruled. You may answer.
I saw that it was Anthony on the floor with a gentleman that I did not know.
Let's move on now with the next question.
How did you know that it was Anthony Martinez? Strike that. Who is Anthony Martinez?
He is the owner of this station.
Okay, how did you recognize that it was Anthony?
Well, it was just him.
Did you recognize him from your years of having him as a customer?
Definitely, yes.
Is he a friend of yours?
Objection, vague.
Overruled.
Do you socialize with Mr. Martinez, or is it a business relationship?
No, we are not friends like that. I just know him from business dealings.
All right, now when you observed the two men on the ground, what happened next?
At first, I didn't immediately know what was happening. I just stood there for a second and tried to take it all in.
What was happening as you were observing these individuals?
Well, Anthony was on his back and the other man was sitting on him and holding him down. He was just punching like crazy.
Do you see the man who was sitting or hitting Anthony in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Would you please indicate him and describe what he is wearing today?
Certainly. He is sitting at the table there by the defense counsel. He is wearing the blue shirt and tie.
Indicating the defendant for the record, Your Honor.
Yes, the record may so reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
What did you observe next, Ms. Williams?
What caught my attention was that I noticed a little pool of blood on the cement. It greatly concerned me.
Now, Ms. Williams, where did you notice the blood?
Beside the oil display. They have this tool cabinet by the entrance, and that's where I first saw it. I then focused on Anthony and saw that his head was bleeding.
Did you notice blood anywhere else in the garage?
Absolutely. The defendant's hands were completely bloody from the punching. He had blood on his shirt and also his pants. Anthony was covered in blood.
What happened next?
I attempted to stop the fight.
How did you do that exactly?
Well, at first I just yelled to try to get their attention and break them apart. That didn't happen, and so I subsequently tried to get the defendant away from Anthony.
How did you accomplish that?
I went behind the defendant and tried to pull him off. I couldn't even move him because he was too big. I kept yelling at the defendant, trying to interrupt his thought process.
Now, after the defendant heard you yelling, then what did you do?
Objection assumes a fact, not an evidence, that the defendant heard him.
Sustained. Next question.
How far were you from the defendant when you were yelling?
I was approximately about 5 feet away. There is no doubt the defendant heard me. When I approached him, I was standing within a foot and he still continued hitting him.
What finally stopped the attack?
I'm not positive what happened. It just seemed that all of a sudden it stopped. The defendant got up and started to walk away.
Where was Mr. Martinez at that time?
Anthony was still on his back in the garage. He wasn't moving. I was positive he was already dead.
Move to strike. Objection. No question pending.
Sustained.
What did you do at that time?
I immediately went to see if Anthony was all right, and I pulled out my cell phone to call 911.
Were you able to complete the call to 911?
Unfortunately, I guess my battery was too low on my phone. There was some customers in the market, and I yelled to call 911. I don't know who called, but the paramedics came just a short time thereafter.
What did you do thereafter until they arrived?
I stayed with Mr. Martinez and tried to comfort him. I repeatedly told him that help was on the way. I didn't want to move him. I really wasn't sure what should be done.
Your Honor, no further questions of Ms. Williams.
All right. Do you have cross-examination?
Yes, briefly, thank you. Ms. Williams, my name is Karen Matthews, and I represent the defendant in this case.
I understand.
There are just a couple questions that I have, if that's okay. Do you remember approximately what time of the day you arrived at the gas station?
Well, not exactly, but I am usually in that area sometime around 11 in the morning.
Do you have a standard route that you travel to make your sales calls?
Normally, yes. I mean, there are always exceptions, but I try to keep the same schedule.
How long have you been calling on that Chevron station?
Approximately 10 years.
And you said the name of it was Bob's Chevron,
That's correct.
but the owner is Anthony Martinez.
To my knowledge, yes.
Why is it called Bob's Chevron then?
Objection, irrelevant.
Overruled.
I don't know.
Has Mr. Martinez been the owner the entire time that you have been servicing that particular station?
Yes, he has. His father owned it before he did, so maybe his name is Bob. I don't know.
Now, you mentioned that there is a market connected to the station.
Yes, there is. It is not like a grocery market, but it's more like...
That's fine. I understand what you are saying.
Okay.
You described that the first thing that you noticed was, well, actually, you testified initially that you heard something unusual. Is that correct?
Yes.
First, you heard a crashing noise. Ultimately, you saw two men on the ground.
Correct. They came through the door and fell backwards to the ground. The door is one of those partial doors where the top half can be open while the bottom is closed.
Do you recall whether or not the door was closed before the two men came through the doorway?
Yes, the bottom part was closed. Minutes earlier, I had come through that entrance into the garage to begin my inventory, and I remember specifically shutting the door.
That was my next question, whether you remember closing the door.
I do. People from the public are not allowed to be in the garage area. The mechanics always want the door to be closed. People are less likely to come walking back there if the door is closed. Absolutely, the door was not open.
Do you know what the door is made out of?
I believe it is a solid wooden door.
Okay, now you made the observation that the two men were fighting. Is that correct?
Yes, they were.
So would you say that it was a mutual combat situation?
They were fighting and yelling profanities at each other.
Could you hear both of the men yelling at each other?
Yes.
Were both men hitting each other or kicking each other?
Yes, they were until they were on the ground and the defendant got on top of Mr. Martinez.
Well, you said that the first time you observed them, they were on the ground. So when would you have seen them fighting before that?
Objection, argumentative, Your Honor.
Well, perhaps you can clarify your question, Ms. Matthews.
Certainly, Your Honor. Thank you.
Next question, please.
You testified they were both hitting each other until they were on the ground. And I was thinking you had said that you initially observed them when they were on the ground. That's my confusion.
Well, they hit the floor and were rolling around and fighting each other. The defendant got on top of Anthony Martinez and trapped him so that he couldn't get up. When he did that, Anthony was trying to protect his face, but the defendant was punching him like a crazy man.
But are you testifying now that the defendant was the only person fighting at that time?
Absolutely. That's my belief.
Okay, now you testified that you observed some blood. Is that correct?
Yes, there was a pool of blood by the door. Anthony had blood all over his entire body.
What about the defendant? Did you notice if he was bleeding?
Yes, there was blood all over his shirt and his hands. I got blood on my outfit just trying to pull him off.
Did you happen to observe whether the defendant was injured in any way?
I'm not sure about that.
Weren't you within a foot of him at one time?
Yes, I was, but I wasn't checking him for any injuries.
You couldn't tell where the defendant was bleeding from. Is that correct?
Well, Anthony's head and face were bleeding pretty bad. The defendant's hands were all bloody, and I don't think he was cut or anything like that. I think the blood was coming from Mr. Martinez.
But you didn't examine the defendant to see if he had any injuries, correct?
No, I did not.
Was the defendant present when the paramedics arrived?
No, he left just before they came. It only took them about 5 minutes to get there, and the defendant was already gone by then.
Did you see the defendant leave the station?
Yes, I did. He got in his automobile and drove away.
Do you remember what kind of car he was driving?
I believe it was a Honda, but I'm not certain.
You associate with mechanics all day, but you don't know what kind of automobile it was?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
Well, let's just try to have the questions and then the answers. Ms. Williams, do you have any recollection of what kind of car it was?
Yes, I think I remember seeing the Honda symbol on the back, but I was more looking at the license plate trying to memorize the number.
All right, let's proceed with the next question.
Thank you. I have a couple additional questions, Your Honor, please.
That's fine.
Ms. Williams, had you ever seen the defendant at that gas station before?
Not that I remember, no.
Did you have any conversation with the defendant after the fight broke up?
I said, "What's the matter with you? What are you doing?"
Did the defendant respond at all?
No, he just looked at us and used some rather insulting language as he drove off.
Your Honor, that's all the questions I have now, but I would request the witness to remain on call.
I assume that we will have redirect examination, so we are not excusing any witness at this time.
I understand, but I don't want the witness released.
All right, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Just a couple of questions, if I might.
Proceed.
Ms. Williams, you testified that you got blood on your clothes during this altercation. Is that correct?
Yes, I sure did. My jacket was ruined.
Where did that blood come from?
When I grabbed the defendant and tried to pull him back, I assume it came from him.
Do you know whose blood it was, though?
It was Anthony's blood. He was very badly beaten and his blood was everywhere.
Do you know if the defendant was bleeding or was he just covered in the victim's blood?
Objection, lack of foundation.
Overruled. Proceed.
I assumed that it was the victim's blood because I didn't see the defendant injured.
Objection, move to strike the answer as an assumption.
That's correct. Sustained. Next question.
I will move on, Your Honor. Ms. Williams, defense counsel asked you if this was a mutual combat situation. Did it seem to you as if the defendant was trying to defend himself against Mr. Martinez?
I did not.
Were you able to tell? Well, strike that. You also testified that you were able to observe the license plate of the defendant's car. Do you remember the number at this time?
Well, I don't remember the number at this time, but I wrote it down that day and gave it to the officers.
Excuse me, please. All parties are ordered back at 1:30 this afternoon. Thank you.